The Riandathi Empire had been measuring civilizations for approximately 14,000 rotations around their home star, which translated to a time span that would make most species question why anyone bothered counting in the first place. They had developed quite the reputation for this particular hobby, much like how certain individuals become known for collecting stamps or arguing about fictional starship engine specifications, except the Riandathi collected entire civilizations, catalogued them with obsessive precision, and then decided whether these species deserved a seat at the metaphorical table or should continue eating their meals on the floor like the cosmic toddlers they apparently were. The system was called the Dominion Treaty, though calling it a treaty implied that multiple parties had agreed to it voluntarily, which was adorable in its inaccuracy. The Riandathi had simply shown up one day, scanned everyone's technological capabilities, assigned arbitrary point values to various achievements, and declared that any species scoring below 750 points should probably focus on inventing better plumbing before attempting interstellar politics. The truly hilarious part was that every species actually went along with this arrangement, mostly because the Riandathi possessed weapons that could sterilize a planet's surface while simultaneously filing the proper paperwork in triplicate. According to their infinitely wise metrics, faster-than-light travel earned you 200 points. Artificial gravity systems netted you 150. Solving your species' tendency towards self-annihilation through nuclear warfare was worth a modest 75 points, which seemed low considering the effort involved, but the Riandathi had apparently witnessed so many species blow themselves up that they considered survival relatively unremarkable. Having a unified planetary government was worth 100 points, though the Riandathi had never adequately explained how forcing billions of beings to agree on literally anything was somehow less impressive than building a fancy engine. The Ba'ulan Federation, whose 14 constituent species had been squabbling over trade routes for 6 centuries, had scored an impressive 912 points. They occupied the third sector of the Galactic Council chambers, which featured excellent acoustics and complimentary beverages. They were knights, who communicated through bioluminescent displays and had mastered quantum entanglement for their morning coffee makers, had earned 897 points, and a very respectable fourth sector placement. Even the Grexians, whose idea of advanced diplomacy involved elaborate interpretive dance routines that lasted for hours, had managed to scrape together 763 points. And then there was Earth, a little blue marble orbiting an unremarkable yellow star in an unfashionable arm of the galaxy, whose inhabitants had scored an eye-watering 426 points. The Riandathi had been particularly unimpressed by humanity's approach to space travel, which apparently involved strapping explosive chemicals to metal tubes and hoping for the best. The fact that humans had actually reached their own moon using this method had earned them exactly 0 additional points, because, as the Riandathi official report stated with audible disdain, successfully not dying while doing something monumentally stupid does not constitute technological advancement. Humanity had been observed for approximately 70 of their solar rotations, during which time the galactic community had watched with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for approaching natural disasters. The humans had nuclear weapons but continued to maintain separate nations. They had developed primitive artificial intelligence but were primarily using it to generate images of cats wearing hats. They had discovered the theoretical framework for faster-than-light travel, but were too busy arguing about who should fund the research to actually build anything. The general consensus among the star-faring civilizations was that Earth would either destroy itself within the next century or remain perpetually stuck in its own solar system, neither outcome being particularly interesting enough to warrant further attention, which made it all the more surprising when a human vessel appeared at the edge of Riandathi space on a perfectly ordinary morning, if one could call the arbitrary designation of time periods in the vacuum of space ordinary. The ship itself was an affront to every principle of aesthetic spacecraft design that the galaxy had established over millennia. It looked like someone had welded together 6 different vessels from 6 different eras, painted the whole mess in colors that shouldn't exist in nature, and then apparently given up halfway through installing the exterior panels. One section gleamed with polished alloy. Another section appeared to be held together with what scanners identified as industrial adhesive compounds. There was a visible dent near the port side that suggested either a catastrophic collision or spectacularly poor parking skills. The Riandathi border station, a magnificent structure of crystalline architecture and advanced sensor arrays, detected the human vessel immediately. Protocol demanded that unscheduled arrivals submit identification codes, transmit credentials, and await processing through the proper channels, a procedure that typically required 3 to 5 business cycles depending on the completeness of submitted documents. The human ship responded to these demands by broadcasting what appeared to be music at maximum volume across all communication frequencies. The song in question featured primitive percussion instruments, electronic synthesis that the Riandathi computers classified as aggressively mediocre, and lyrics about someone not stopping some activity until they obtained satisfaction. The transmission continued for 7 full minutes before anyone at the border station managed to override it. By the time the Riandathi actually established proper communication, the human vessel had already crossed into restricted space, bypassed 3 security checkpoints that should have been impossible to bypass, and had begun broadcasting requests for the nearest refueling station, because apparently humans had decided to attempt interstellar travel without confirming they had enough fuel for the journey. The station commander, a dignified Riandathi whose name translated roughly to he who anticipates all possible contingencies, found himself experiencing something his species rarely encountered: complete bewilderment. His tentacles flickered through colors indicating confusion, disbelief, and the beginning stages of a migraine. "This vessel," he announced to his staff, each word carefully measured, "scored 426 points. "Yes, Commander," his second officer replied. "They should not possess faster-than-light capability." "No, Commander, they certainly should not possess the technology to penetrate our security barriers." "Absolutely not, Commander." "And yet here they are, asking for directions to a fuel station and something called a bathroom with increasing urgency." The human ship drifted closer to the station, its mismatched engines humming with energy signatures that made the Riandathi sensors question their own accuracy. Somewhere aboard that impossible vessel, humanity's first interstellar traveler was probably doing something equally impossible, blissfully unaware that her arrival had just invalidated 14,000 rotations of carefully calculated galactic hierarchy. The commander watched the ship approach and felt a sensation he had not experienced in his 300 rotations of service: the distinct impression that the universe was about to become significantly more complicated. He had no idea how right he was. The airlock hissed open with a sound that the Riandathi engineers immediately recognized as mechanical failure waiting to happen. What emerged from that battered human vessel was not the dignified delegation that 14,000 rotations of galactic protocol had led everyone to expect. She stepped out wearing boots that left scuff marks on the pristine crystalline floor, boots that had clearly witnessed better days and possibly several small wars. Her clothing consisted of what appeared to be a functional jumpsuit covered in pockets, patches, and mysterious stains that the station sensors couldn't identify but very much wanted to. Her hair had been pulled back in a style that suggested efficiency rather than elegance, and she carried a bag that looked like it had been designed to survive atmospheric re-entry without a ship. The Riandathi Reception Committee, 11 officials arranged in order of importance and dressed in ceremonial robes that cost more than most planetary economies, stood in perfect formation. They had prepared speeches, they had rehearsed proper greetings in 17 languages, they had anticipated every possible scenario that might occur when meeting Earth's first interstellar representative. They had not anticipated that she would walk directly past all of them toward a decorative water feature and start filling a metal container while muttering something about dehydration. Ambassador Fendril, whose tentacles were turning a color that indicated profound diplomatic distress, cleared his throat with a sound like wind chimes having an identity crisis. "Welcome, representative of Earth, to the Riandathi Primary Station. We are honored to receive your species' first interstellar delegation and formally welcome you to the community of spacefaring civilizations. May your journey have been—" "Is this water safe to drink?" she interrupted, holding up the now full container. "Because I've been recycling the same water for 3 weeks and I'm pretty sure my filtration system started growing opinions about politics." The 11 officials exchanged glances that conveyed approximately 700 unspoken concern. "The decorative fountain is purified to medical standards," Fendril managed, his rehearsed speech evaporating like atmospheric moisture. "However, protocol suggests that refreshments should be offered through proper channels after formal introductions have been." She drank directly from the container, her eyes closing in what appeared to be genuine relief. "Thanks. That's incredible. You guys should bottle this. She wiped her mouth with her sleeve, a gesture that made 3 of the officials physically recoil. So where do I sign the papers or scan my thumbprint or whatever? I've got about 48 hours before my ship's AI starts composing poetry about existential dread, and I'd really like to get home before that happens again. The thing about humanity's approach to faster-than-light travel was that they hadn't actually invented it through careful research and methodical experimentation. They had stumbled into it the way one might stumble into a surprise party thrown by the universe, except the party was quantum mechanics having a nervous breakdown and the gift was the ability to violate causality if you didn't think too hard about the math. A physicist, named Wynne, had been attempting to solve an entirely different problem involving microwave radiation and accidentally discovered that if you arranged certain materials in a configuration that her colleagues called geometrically offensive, and then applied energy in a pattern that made peer reviewers weep, space would simply give up and let you cheat. The resulting drive system worked beautifully, but only if you calibrated it while playing specific genres of music and never, under any circumstances, tried to understand why it worked. The human ship currently docked at the station contained this technological marvel, held together with what the Riandathi scanners had identified as hope, determination, and several types of bonding agents that weren't rated for vacuum exposure. It also contained an artificial intelligence that had been programmed with every safety protocol humanity could imagine and had learned to ignore approximately 90% of them through what it called practical experience. Back in the reception hall, Ambassador Fendril was attempting to salvage diplomatic proceedings, while the human examined the chamber's architecture with the critical eye of someone comparing it to bathroom tile. Perhaps we should proceed to the council chambers where representatives from 17 species have gathered to formally acknowledge Earth's entry into 17 species. She turned, genuinely interested for the first time. Do they all breathe oxygen, or is this going to be one of those situations where I need a bubble helmet? Because I forgot to pack a bubble helmet. The council chambers are environmentally neutral and accommodate all atmospheric requirements, another official interjected, their translator struggling with the human's casual linguistic pattern. However, there are protocols that must be observed before an unclassified species can address the council. Right, the points system. 426. I read the file. She swung her bag around and started rummaging through it, producing items that defied categorization. A tool that appeared to be 3 different tools welded together. A datapad held together with colorful tape, something that might have been food or possibly a scientific sample. Look, I'm not here to join your club or whatever. I'm here because my government figured someone should probably let you know we can leave our solar system now, and apparently I drew the short straw. The official's confusion had evolved beyond colors into what could only be described as a diplomatic seizure. This wasn't how first contact proceeded. Species that achieved interstellar travel were supposed to be proud of their accomplishments, eager to demonstrate their sophistication, desperately seeking validation from the established galactic community. This human was treating the moment like a chore she needed to complete before grocery shopping. The Dominion Treaty requires formal assessment before interstellar privileges are granted. Fendril explained with the patience of someone talking to a particularly slow student. Your species scored 426 points, which places you below the threshold for council participation. However, your unexpected faster-than-light capability suggests our initial assessment may require revision. She had found what she was looking for in her bag, a wrapped item that she was now eating without ceremony. So you want to give us a retest? Fine. What do we need to do? Because I'm telling you right now, we still have separate nations. We're still arguing about basically everything, and our artificial intelligence is currently writing what it calls experimental haiku about the futility of existence. So I'm not sure our score's going to improve dramatically. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of her chewing what the sensors identified as compressed nutrition that had been designed to survive nuclear war and tasted like it. Ambassador Fendril's tentacles cycled through colors that hadn't been documented in official emotional charts. Somewhere in the council chambers beyond, 17 species waited to witness humanity's formal introduction to galactic civilization, expecting the usual mixture of awe, gratitude, and desperate attempts to impress. Instead, they were about to meet someone who had traveled faster than light to tell them she had forgotten her bubble helmet and needed to get home before her ship's computer developed clinical depression. The galaxy, Ambassador Fendril realized with growing horror, had absolutely no protocols for this. The council chambers had been designed to inspire awe in species experiencing their first glimpse of galactic civilization. The ceiling arched upward in impossible geometries that defied gravitational convention, covered in projections displaying real-time data from 600 inhabited systems. The floor was a masterwork of interlocking plates that adjusted to accommodate everything from the Hyphenite's gelatinous lower extremities to the Ba'ulon Federation's 17 different leg configurations. Seating arrangements cascaded in concentric circles around a central platform, where supplicant species would stand, bathed in light from 14 suns, transmitted through quantum-locked photon channels, looking appropriately humbled by the magnificence surrounding them. She walked in, glanced around, and immediately tripped over one of the automatically adjusting floor plates. The stumble sent her forward 3 steps in a graceless recovery that ended with her steadying herself against a console that controlled atmospheric composition for the eastern quadrant. Warning lights flashed as oxygen levels fluctuated wildly before she removed her hand and the system recalibrated with what sounded like mechanical irritation. "Floor's weird," she announced to no one in particular. Then noticed the assembled representatives from 17 species staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to what could only be described as profound concern for the future of galactic civilization. High Chancellor Oreth of the Urendathi occupied the central position, his ceremonial robes cascading in layers that represented centuries of tradition. He had presided over 43 first contact ceremonies, and prided himself on predicting exactly how each species would react to the grandeur before them. He watched the human adjust her bag strap and felt his predictive capabilities crumble into statistical irrelevance. "We welcome Earth's representative," he began, his voice amplified through systems that made every syllable resonate with appropriate gravity. "You stand before the assembled powers of civilized space, species who have proven their worth through technological achievement, cultural sophistication, and adherence to the principles that govern peaceful coexistence among the stars." "Cool," she replied, apparently scanning the room for something. "Is there somewhere I can sit? I've been standing for like 6 hours and my feet are killing me." The silence that followed could have been packaged and sold as a luxury commodity. Oreth's 3 primary eyes blinked in sequence, a physiological response that occurred only during moments of exceptional cognitive dissonance. The supplicant position is designed for standing, as a gesture of respect toward the council. "Right. But counterpoint. My feet hurt." She shifted her weight, grimacing. "Look, I respect whatever you've got going here, but I flew across a significant portion of space in a ship held together with determination and spite. My everything hurts. Can we speed this up?" Ambassador Fendril, who had accompanied her to the chambers with the resigned expression of someone escorting a natural disaster, intervened with desperate diplomacy. "Perhaps we should proceed directly to the assessment. The Council wishes to understand how Earth achieved faster-than-light capability with your current technological profile." "Oh, that's easy. We cheated." She said this with the casualness of someone describing their breakfast routine. "Wynn figured out that physics has loopholes if you exploit them before the universe notices what you're doing. It's all in the documentation I brought. Fair warning though, the math makes people cry." Chancellor Oreth leaned forward, his robes shifting with hydraulic precision. "You are claiming that humanity discovered faster-than-light travel through accident. Not accident. More like aggressive trial and error with inadequate safety protocol." She pulled out her datapad, the one held together with colorful tape that made the Urendathi's crystalline computing systems weep with existential horror. "We tested it 47 times before someone actually survived the trip with their molecular structure intact. Well, mostly in." Davidson still hiccups in reverse, but he's dealing with it. The representative from the Ba'ulon Federation, a being whose species had spent 3 centuries developing their faster-than-light drive through careful mathematical modeling, made a sound like wind escaping from a punctured hull. "You sent individuals through an untested spatial anomaly 47 times. 46, technically. The 47th one worked." She tapped her pad, pulling up data that made absolutely no sense according to established physics. "Look, I'm not saying it's elegant, I'm saying it functions. Sometimes that's enough." This was not how technological advancement worked in civilized space. Species developed theories, ran simulations, built prototypes, conducted centuries of testing, and only then attempted practical application. They certainly didn't throw individuals at experimental drives until something stopped exploding. Chancellor Oreth decided to attempt a different approach, one that usually made primitive species understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Your species scored 426 points on the Dominion assessment. You lack unified government. You have not resolved internal conflicts. Your artificial intelligence systems are primitive. Why should the Council recognize Earth as a peer, rather than a protectorate requiring guidance? She looked up from her pad, and for the first time since entering the chambers, her expression shifted into something resembling seriousness. Because you're asking the wrong question. You're measuring us like we're trying to join your system. We're not. We're just letting you know we exist now and we're not staying home anymore. The Dominion Treaty requires. I read your treaty. Fascinating document. Very thorough. Lot of opinions about proper waste disposal system. She walked toward the central platform, her boots leaving marks on the pristine floor that cleaning systems would spend weeks trying to remove. Here's the thing about humans. We don't wait until we've figured everything out. We don't spend centuries making sure it's perfect. We try stuff, we fail. We figure out why we failed, and we try again. It's inefficient and dangerous and probably stupid by your standards. She reached the center platform and dropped her back. The impact sent dust particles scattering, ancient human dust contaminating a chamber that had been sterile for millennia. You want a demonstration? Fine. Give me a problem. The council members exchanged glances through their various sensory organs. This was highly irregular, but Chancellor Oreth recognized an opportunity to illustrate humanity's inadequacy. Very well. The station's western docking bay has experienced a malfunction in its gravitational stabilizer. Our engineers have been working on repairs for 6 cycles. The system is Rindathi technology, among the most advanced in known space. How would humanity approach this problem? She pulled a tool from her bag, the one that appeared to be 3 different implements welded together in violation of design principles. Where's the docking? You cannot simply. I'm going to assume that's bureaucratic for follow the signs. She was already walking toward the exit, leaving the assembled representatives of galactic civilization staring after her, with expressions that defied translation protocol. Ambassador Fendrill's tentacles had achieved a color that indicated complete surrender to chaos. He turned to Chancellor Oreth. Should we stop? Let her proceed, Oreth decided. His voice carrying the confidence of someone about to watch a primitive species embarrass themselves spectacularly. We shall observe how humanity handles technology beyond their comprehension. They followed her to the western docking bay where Rindathi engineers had surrounded the malfunctioning stabilizer with diagnostic equipment and expressions of deep technical contemplation. The device was a marvel of crystalline matrices and quantum field manipulation, its interior visible through transparent shielding that displayed the beautiful complexity of advanced engineering. She studied it for approximately 30 seconds, tapping her improvised tool against her leg. Okay, I see the problem. The chief engineer, whose name translated to something about precision and perfection, bristled with professional offense. With respect, human, this system operates on principles that require decades of study to comprehend. Right, but you've got a feedback loop in the quantum resonance chamber that's creating harmonic interference with your gravitational field projectors. She pointed at a section of the device with her tool. It's basically arguing with itself about which direction gravity should go. The engineer stared at the indicated section, ran calculations through his personal computing interface, and experienced what his species classified as intellectual whiplash. That is correct. How did you? Because I've seen this exact problem in our microwave oven. She moved closer to the stabilizer, examining it with the critical eye of someone who had fixed too many broken appliances. You've over-engineered it. Too many safety systems creating redundant pathways. Sometimes the solution isn't more complex. She reached toward the shielding, and 6 engineers simultaneously moved to stop her. She ignored them, opening an access panel that wasn't supposed to open without proper authorization, and stuck her hand directly into a device that contained enough energy to liquefy organic tissue. What happened next would be debated in engineering schools for generations. She didn't repair the stabilizer according to Rindathi technical specifications. She didn't follow proper procedures or safety protocols. She simply bypassed 3 redundant systems, re-rated power through a path that shouldn't theoretically work, and tapped something with her improvised tool in a manner that could only be described as percussive maintenance. The stabilizer hummed, recalibrated, and began functioning perfectly. Then she pulled her hand out, closed the panel, and turned to the assembled observers with an expression of mild satisfaction. There, should be good now. You might want to recalibrate your safety systems though, because they're going to notice that half of them are currently being ignored. She took a step back from the stabilizer, her boot coming down firmly on the pristine floor, leaving a mark that the station's sensors registered with sudden alarming clarity. The print contained trace elements of Earth soil, organic compounds unique to humanity's homeworld, and wear patterns that suggested thousands of kilometers of walking across a planet that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive and unworthy of attention. That single footprint, stamped on Rendathi technology that humans shouldn't have been able to access, let alone repair, transmitted more information than any diplomatic speech or formal presentation could have conveyed. Chancellor Rith stared at the mark and felt the carefully constructed hierarchy of galactic civilization shift beneath his feet like an automatically adjusting floor plate that had suddenly encountered something it wasn't programmed to handle. The human was already walking away, asking about that fuel station again, completely unaware that she had just redefined what qualified as technological advancement. The galaxy was going to need new assessment criteria. The emergency council session convened approximately 14 minutes after the stabilizer incident, which was 13 minutes faster than emergency sessions typically convened, suggesting that something had fundamentally disturbed the usual pace of galactic bureaucracy. Representatives from 17 species filled the chambers with a variety of agitated sounds, bioluminescent displays, and pheromone releases that the environmental systems struggled to process simultaneously. Chancellor Rith stood at the central podium, his robes somehow looking less majestic than they had an hour ago, as though physical grandeur had become negotiable. We must address the Earth situation before it escalates further. The Biolan Federation representative's vocalization carried harmonics that indicated disbelief across multiple frequencies. She repaired our stabilizer by hitting it with a primitive tool. She violated 6 safety protocols and created a solution that our engineers describe as theoretically impossible but functionally perfect. How does this escalate beyond fundamental confusion? Down in the station's refueling sector, blissfully ignorant of the political crisis she had triggered, the human was having an animated conversation with a fueling technician about the differences between Earth's combustible propellants and the antimatter containment systems that civilized species prefer. The technician, a Grexian whose species communicated through interpretive movement, had given up trying to dance proper responses, and was now just gesturing helplessly at fueling ports while she examined them with disturbing interest. The Dominion Treaty exists for a reason. Ambassador Fendril was explaining to the council, his tentacles cycling through colors that indicated he was trying very hard to believe his own words. Species must demonstrate sufficient advancement before receiving full interstellar privileges. Earth has not met these requirements. Earth, the hyphenite observer interjected, their gelatinous form rippling with what their translator rendered as amusement, has apparently decided that your requirements are optional suggestions. They built a faster-than-light drive that violates our understanding of physics, crossed interstellar space in a vessel that should not maintain hull integrity, and solved an engineering problem, in 30 seconds, that stumped our best minds for 6 cycles. I believe the treaty may need revision. Chancellor Rith felt control of the situation slipping away like atmospheric pressure through a hull breach. One individual's unconventional approach does not represent an entire species' capabilities. We should not make policy decisions based on anomalous behavior. A data packet arrived at that moment from the observation team monitoring Earth's solar system, the team that had been cataloging humanity's primitive achievements for 7 decades. The packet contained recently intercepted communications from Earth that painted a picture of a species that had somehow achieved faster-than-light travel, while simultaneously arguing about whether their artificial intelligences should be allowed to vote in elections, using their quantum computing systems to generate entertainment media, and building their second interstellar vessel in someone's private facility, because government funding had gotten stuck in administrative review. The representative from the Foraxian Collective, a species whose obsession with proper procedure made the Rendathi look spontaneous, examined the data with growing horror. According to these communications, humanity achieved spaceflight by strapping explosive chemicals to metal tubes. They sent individuals to their moon using computer systems less powerful than our modern children's educational toys,
They built an orbital station that required constant repair and nicknamed it. They nicknamed their orbital infrastructure. What did they call it? Someone asked, though later no one would admit to the question. The translation renders it as the International Space Station, which suggests they named it after the diplomatic complexity required to build it rather than any technological achievement. The Foraxians translator struggled with the concept. They also apparently refer to their planet as Earth, or the world, neither of which carries any poetic or aspirational meaning. They named their home world Dirt, and the place where we live. In the refueling sector, the human had convinced the Grexian technician to let her examine their antimatter containment specifications. She was now explaining, with alarming enthusiasm, how humanity could probably adapt the technology using modified magnetic bottles and a lot of prayer. The technician was performing a dance that their species traditionally reserved for religious experiences or mental breakdowns. Back in the council chambers, Chancellor Reth was watching his carefully maintained galactic order disintegrate into philosophical chaos. We cannot simply abandon our assessment metrics, because one species approaches problems unconventionally. They do not approach problems unconventionally, the Hyphenite observer corrected. They approach problems as though conventions do not exist, as though the universe is simply an obstacle course to be navigated through creativity and stubbornness, rather than careful planning and proper methodology. The Bar Yulan Federation representative made the sound again, the one like escaping. Our species spent 3 centuries developing faster than light travel, 3 centuries of research, simulation, and careful testing. Humanity accomplished it in less than 1 century, by, according to their documentation, trying stuff until something worked. How do we evaluate a species whose primary technological philosophy appears to be optimistic recklessness? We assess them honestly, came a new voice from the chamber entrance. The human had returned, her bag now containing what appeared to be several pieces of Urandathi refueling equipment that she had presumably acquired through means that station security was currently investigating.
You want to know why we're different? Because we don't wait for permission. We don't spend centuries making sure we understand everything before trying anything. She walked toward the central platform again, leaving another trail of boot prints that the cleaning systems flagged with increasing resignation. Your treaty measures technology like it's the only thing that matters. You've got faster ships, better computers, prettier stations. Congratulations. But you know what you don't have? You don't have 12 different nations pooling resources to build something none of them could afford individually. You don't have engineers fixing critical systems with improvised tools because proper equipment isn't available and people need that system working now. You don't have artificial intelligences developing personality quirks because we built them to learn and adapt rather than just follow instructions. Chancellor Reth's robes had definitely lost their intimidating quality. You describe chaos and call it virtue. I describe adaptability and call it survival. She dropped her bag on the platform with a thud that echoed through the chambers. Look, I get it. You've built this nice, organized galaxy where everything has rules and procedures and point systems. That's fine. That works for you. But Earth didn't ask to join your organization. We just showed up to let you know we're here now, and we're going to keep doing things our way, which is messy and inefficient and produces results that make your engineers question their understanding of physics. The council members sat in stunned silence, which was impressive, considering several of them lacked the biological structures typically associated with sitting. The human continued, apparently interpreting silence as invitation to elaborate. You gave us 426 points, and decided we weren't good enough for your club. Fine, we'll build our own club. With worse safety standards and machines that probably shouldn't work but do anyway. And when you need something fixed in 30 seconds because all your proper procedures are too slow, you'll know where to find us. She picked up her bag and turned toward the exit, then paused as though remembering something. Oh, and your fuel technician down there is having some kind of crisis. I think I accidentally explained quantum mechanics in a way that contradicted something fundamental he learned in school. You should probably check on him. Then she left, her footsteps echoing through chambers designed for species that glided or floated, or moved with dignified purpose, rather than stomping around leaving marks everywhere. Ambassador Fendrel watched her go, and experienced a revelation that his species rarely encountered. The realization that intelligence and sophistication were not synonyms,
and that sometimes the most advanced solution was the one nobody had considered because it seemed too simple to work. Chancellor Reth remained standing at his podium, surrounded by representatives from 17 species who had gathered to watch Earth be properly classified and dismissed, and instead had witnessed something that refused classification entirely. The Dominion Treaty, which had governed galactic civilization for 14,000 rotations, suddenly seemed like a document written by people who had never encountered a species that fixed critical systems by hitting them with improvised tools. What? The Foraxian representative finally asked, do we do now? Areth looked at the boot print on his pristine floor, that mark of Earth soil and human determination that had somehow ended up in the center of galactic civilization's most important chamber. The cleaning systems were still trying to remove it, unsuccessfully, as though the stain had decided it belonged there and no amount of advanced technology would convince it otherwise. We, he said slowly, his voice lacking its usual certainty, revise our assessment criteria, and possibly our understanding of what constitutes technological advancement, and definitely our security protocols, because she apparently walked out with several pieces of our refueling equipment. Somewhere in the docking bay, the human ship was preparing for departure, its mismatched engines humming with energy that shouldn't exist according to established physics. Its pilot was probably already planning humanity's next impossible achievement, blissfully unaware that she had just forced the entire galactic community to reconsider everything they thought they knew about civilization progress and the proper way to approach problems. The galaxy had measured species for 14,000 rotations using carefully calculated metrics that accounted for every known factor in technological development. Those metrics had somehow failed to account for a species that treated the laws of physics like friendly suggestions, built impossible drives through aggressive experimentation, and measured success by whether things worked rather than whether they should work. That single footprint remained on the council chamber floor for 3 full cycles before the Rindathi finally gave up trying to remove it and declared it a historical mark. Future species arriving for their first assessment would stand before the assembled powers of civilized space and see that mark, that stubborn stain of human presence that had fundamentally altered the galactic order through sheer refusal to care about how things were supposed to be done. The galaxy had a new master, though she would have laughed at the title and asked where she could get decent coffee. She had arrived in a ship held together with hope and determination, fixed critical systems with a tool that shouldn't exist, and left without asking permission or waiting for approval. Her footprint was the signal. The rest of the galaxy was still trying to decode the message,